Good afternoon and welcome to our Cook Center fundraiser and Fireside Chat, celebrating the 15th anniversary of the Gail and Bill Cook Center for Entrepreneurship. It is our second event this year, so you know this one is special. So thank you all for being here tonight. Give yourselves a round of applause. Appreciate it. I'm Eric Coyne, Chancellor of Ivy Tech Community College, Bloomington, and it's an honor to be here today with so many passionate business leaders, entrepreneurs, and supporters of Ivy Tech. We're delighted to have John Bender with us today as our keynote speaker, and Dan Peterson from Cook, who will be moderating today's discussion. Thank you both for being here. Ivy Tech alum and State Representative Dave Hall.
Thank you.
State Representative Peggy Mayfield. From U.S. Senator Todd Young's office, Diane Powell. And from U.S. Senator Jim Banks's office, Hamza Salih. Ivy Tech State Board of Trustee, Jesse Grand. Our Campus Board of Trustee Chair, Connie Ferguson. Chancellor Emeritus, John Weichart. And several members of our Campus Board of Trustees. Thank you all for your continued support of Ivy Tech. At this time, I'd like to invite Diane Powell up. She has a special presentation from Senator Young.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's great to be here with you all today, seeing so many familiar faces. But I have a message from Senator Todd Young, and it is my honor to read it for you all today. Dear fellow Hoosiers, congratulations to Ivy Tech Community College, Bloomington, and the Cook Center for Entrepreneurship on the 15th anniversary of this annual event, celebrating entrepreneurship, vision, and education. Since its launch in 2010, this gathering has provided an important forum for students, business leaders, and community members to connect around innovation and free enterprise. The Cook Center has also offered the opportunity to learn from respected leaders in business and public life whose experiences and perspectives have helped inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. They are here today too. Some of our students are here today, so always wonderful to see you. The Cook Center's events and work have contributed to Indiana's entrepreneurial ecosystem while supporting valuable student and client programs at Ivy Tech. Its commitment to innovation and community partnership is an asset to Bloomington and to our state. I commend Ivy Tech Bloomington and the Cook Center for Entrepreneurship on this milestone and wish you continued success in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, and please pass on our thanks and gratitude to Senator Young. I'd also like to thank our entrepreneurship students, led by Program Chair Sue Ann Graham, for setting up their pop-up shops out front. Hopefully you guys got a chance to take those in. Their ingenuity and drive is really a lot of fun to watch as they embark on their own entrepreneurial journeys. They leverage these pop-up shops to test out ideas, to test their products, to do a little market research, and we are really excited for the work they do and to be able to provide them an area here on campus to do that. So thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. I'd like to also thank everyone who made tonight possible, our Cook Center team, led by Steve Bryant. Our events team, led by Tina Zmick, our facilities team for setting everything up and taking great care of this building and our facilities, and Chef Lee for catering tonight's event. Thank you. Before I introduce John and Dan, I'd like to take a moment to honor one of the Cook Center's namesakes, Gail Cook, who passed away 2 months ago. We're honored to have Carl here with us tonight. Thanks, Carl. Gail's belief, there we go. Gail's belief in the power of entrepreneurship inspired countless students and Hoosier entrepreneurs. Her impact is evident in the many businesses and futures she helped launch through Ivy Tech. The Gail and Bill Cook Center for Entrepreneurship continues to embody that vision, helping businesses start, grow, and thrive right here in our community. And so it is my great honor to announce Ivy Tech Wilmington's newest scholarship, the Gail Cook Endowed Scholarship for Entrepreneurship. Made possible by a generous gift from Connie and Steve Ferguson, as well as several of their teammates from the Cook Group. Thank you very much. Gail's legacy will continue to inspire and support our students for generations to come. Thank you to the Fergusons and all who made this possible. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator and guest of honor. So, brief, what's about to happen. So I'm going to introduce Dan and John. And then John's going to come up, say a few words, and then when he's done, Dan's going to come up, and they're going to sit down, and Dan's going to moderate and have a chat with John. Fireside chat. No surprises. No surprises.
What could possibly?
Microphones have been tested multiple times. Dan Peterson serves as Vice President of Industry and Government Affairs for Cook Group, headquartered right here in Wilmington. Since joining Cook in 1989, Dan has held leadership roles in operations, finance, and human resources. His current work focuses on healthcare, education, economic and workforce development, and community engagement. Dan earned both his BS in biology and MBA in finance from Indiana University, who, by the way, is a pretty good football team. I'm going to throw that out there. Let's just go ahead and have that moment. He serves on numerous boards, including as chairman of both the Indiana Commission for Higher Education and BioCrossroads. He's also a board member of the Sagamore Institute, Regional Opportunity Initiatives, and founding board member of the Indiana Biosciences Research Institute. Thank you, Dan, for being here today. Our featured guest today, John Bender, has more than 5 decades of experience as one of Indiana's most respected entrepreneurs. He has founded and led several well-known Southern Indiana businesses, successfully guiding ventures from concept to commercialization. A Bloomington native, John served in the U.S. Air Force as an electronics technician after high school. While in the Air Force, he began his pizza journey, becoming one of the founders of the original Pizza Hut. Afterward, he became one of its largest franchisees in the Midwest, building a 25-store chain throughout Indiana. John now serves as chairman of Bender Lumber, an 8-store retail building materials chain in southern Indiana, and as chief marketing officer and chairman at First Capital Group. He's also founder and board member of Sentry BioPharma Services, a 20-year-old company with operations in Indianapolis, Columbus, and Denver. That's just south of Columbus. John is deeply involved in regional economic development and serves on several local boards. He's a past vice chairman of the White House Conference on Small Business and has served on the Federal Reserve Small Business Committee. And on a personal note, nearly 35 years ago, John was one of the people cheering me on as I prepared to begin my own Air Force journey. One spring morning during my senior year, John took me up for an airplane ride, and we flew all over Wilmington. And then we came down, and we hopped in his Porsche, and we drove all over Wilmington. John had really hoped I was going to become a fighter pilot, and that I would one day give him a ride in a fighter jet. That did not happen. But it was through his encouragement that meant a great deal to me. At that time, a lot of people in the community were like, "What are you doing? I thought you were playing basketball. Why are you going to the Air Force?" And there were a handful of people in the community, John being one of them, who took time, was proud of what I was going to do, and really encouraged me. So, thank you. So he's also a good guy. So it's now my distinct pleasure to welcome John Bender to the stage, and shortly thereafter, Dan Peterson. Thank you very much.
Well, before I start, it seems like I should answer the question I've gotten several times: what happened to my face? Now, normally when you see a guy, especially if he's got bandages on both hands, normally you'd expect a guy to say, "You should see the other person. You should see the other guy." And if you don't like that idea, I'll just reflect on, I'm a bicycle rider, and President George Bush was also a bicycle rider. And maybe you might remember that one day he showed up at a press conference and his face was kind of mashed up. And the press, of course, said, "What happened to you?" He said, "Well, I'm a bike rider. It's not if you're going to have a wreck, it's when you have a wreck." Now, if you don't like that story, I'll let you use your imagination. I'm going to try to tell you a little bit the history of Pizza Hut, and then I'll kind of finish by sharing how I got into the lumber business, because that doesn't seem like that would be a straight line at all, but that's what happened. As Eric mentioned, I got out of high school, tried a little college, didn't work out, and so I joined the Air Force. And while I was in the Air Force, one day was in my apartment. I was married by this time, and there was a knock on the door. It was a Sunday afternoon, and there were two guys at the door, Dan and Frank Carney. And they introduced themselves, and they said, "Our sister lives in the same apartment complex, and she told us that you have a reputation for making pizza, and we would like to go in the pizza business, but we really don't know much about it." So they sat down, and we talked a little bit, and so I suggested, "Why don't you come back on Wednesday and I'll make a pizza and I'll show you." I guess I was going to show you that I know how to do it. So they came back on Wednesday, and I made pizza for them, and we're visiting, and they said, "We'd really like to hire you." And I need a job, because at this point my wife's pregnant, she no longer can work, and airman's pay is modest, to say the least. So I'm pretty interested, and so it happens I walk back in the kitchen with my wife, and she says to me, "John, they need you worse than you need them." So with that encouragement, I walked back and I said, "Fellas, I'd love to help you, but I'd like to be your partner." Well, Frank was the same age as I was. He was 19, but Dan was 5 or 6 years older. Dan said, "Well," and he made his mind up right there on the spot. He said, "We'll tell you what we'll do. We'll hire you. We'll pay you. We're not going to work. We're not going to pay ourselves. And if it's successful and we get along, you can be our partner." So with that encouragement, I thought, well, this is good. I'm going to get paid. It can't go too bad, because I'm going to get paid for doing what I'm going to do. And so I said, well, I agree to do it. So now they take me over and they show me the building they've leased. It's 600 square feet. It's a tiny little building. It's been a bar for years. And they're going to convert it to a pizza restaurant. Well, the next thing I find out, they don't have any money. And so perhaps at this point, I got to tell you a little bit about my childhood growing up so you can understand the next few ideas I'm going to share with you. I was really fortunate growing up because I had a variety of jobs. My uncles had several restaurants. In fact, you'd be familiar with one of them because it became Ladyman's Cafe on Kirkwood. Many of you know where that is. And then I also worked, I got a chance to hang out in a lumberyard mill. And so I got used to seeing people cut lumber, cut plywood, and build cabinets and so forth. And then I really was fortunate. I worked for Howard Young, helping build houses for 2 years. So I had a variety of experiences, and I got to add, of course, I worked for the pizzeria on Kirkwood for about a year and a half. That's where I learned the pizza business, of course. But what's important about the rest of those stories is because basically we go to work on this building, and it's just this little tiny building, and I've got to build the counters. I come up with the idea of building a bench around the outside wall so I can get 5 tables instead of 3 tables, and this is a tiny little place. And as I find out they don't have any money, I now have got to make lots of adjustments. I'll give you just a few of them. Normally in the pizza business, you would have a make table that's refrigerated. It'll have some stainless steel containers in it. It'll keep the toppings cold, and so they won't spoil, of course. And couldn't afford that, so growing up in the restaurant business, I had observed that it was uncommon for a restaurant to use crocks, because if you refrigerate a crock, it'll stay cold for quite a long time. So crocks are very, very cheap, so that became our containers. We couldn't afford any kind of formica or marble or any kind of tops. Well, growing up around the lumber business, I understood what treated masonite was. It makes a perfect countertop. Just a variety of things like that based on my experience, but probably one of the best ones is we couldn't afford a dough making machine. I'm sorry, but I sure glad you helped me do that.
We want to hear it all the way in the back.
Well, of course, somebody should have yelled at me. Normally, people could hear me without the microphone anyway, but anyway, got to tell you the story about the dough. So I look at, we can't buy a dough making machine because they're too expensive. So I know that you can make dough by hand. I've been making it at home by hand, so I understand that. So I go look at stainless steel tub, and they're expensive. And so I get the bright idea. I go buy a baby bathtub. Visualize a plastic baby bathtub. And I will tell you that we probably had 10 or 12 stores, and we still were making dough in a baby bathtub. Well, there's a few other things. I couldn't find a baking oven. I had to buy a roasting oven. Well, no, I didn't buy a roasting oven. I found a roasting oven in the junkyard. It wouldn't run hot enough, and so I talked to somebody that knew more than I did, and they told me if I drilled the orifice out and increased the air and cut the thermostat off, I could get the thing to run at 500 degrees, which is what I needed to do. So as you can see, I won't go into a lot more detail. A lot of just shortcuts and figuring out how to make do, and it had to be based on all the experiences I'd had as a kid growing up. Now, at the point that I'm going to tell the story of how I got in the lumber business, Pizza Hut has 4 or 5 locations in Wichita, probably got 3 in Oklahoma, 1 in Texas, 1 in Missouri, and 3 or 4 franchises. And here's how we got to that point. The first store we built was very successful, but it was very small. The second store we opened was not successful. The third business we went into was a delicatessen, and it was very interesting because it was a delicatessen that served prepared food. And because it served prepared food, on Sunday it could sell beer and cigarettes. Very lucrative business. The owner was ill. He was willing to sell it to us on contract. We now had 1 successful pizza restaurant, 1 not very successful pizza restaurant, so now we're going to be in the deli business. Well, you might guess what happened. The legislature met. They repealed the laws that required the chain stores not to sell beer and cigarettes, and suddenly we don't have a business. So what to do? Well, we liquidate the stock, and we decided we'll convert it into Pizza Hut. And that was our first really roaring successful Pizza Hut. It was a much bigger building. It was located in a lot of traffic. And on the basis of that is how we were able to begin to franchise stores and open more stores of our own. So about this time, I come home on vacation, and I stopped to see my dad. He works at a company called Wegmiller Lumber Company. And I just started thinking about my dad. He's obviously built this business. He doesn't own it, but he's been very successful in building it. He's helped these customers be successful. And so I'm thinking he really ought to be in business for himself. And I'd like to just step back and give you the history of this company real quickly. My wife says, get closer. Okay. Is that better? I'm so sorry. The lumber company actually was started in 1931 by a fellow named Wegmiller and Davis. And in 1937, Wegmiller buys Davis out. My dad walks in the back door, and Wegmiller says, I just bought my partner out. I need to hire someone. I like you. Would you come to work for me? My dad did not have a job. And he said, well, I'd be interested. So he hired him. It was $12.50 a week. So my dad goes to work, and he's been dating my mom for a while, and he'd like to marry her, but he feels like that, well, it's good that he's got a steady job, but he'd like to make more money than she makes, and she makes $15 a week as the manager of the candy department at the 5 and 10 store downtown. So about a year goes by, and he says to Mr. Wegmiller, I'd like to have a raise. And Wegmiller said, why do you want a raise? He said, well, I want to get married. He said, well, I'll give you 15. You know, my dad said, I need $15.50. I've got to make more money than my wife does. Now, the reason I tell that story is very important, because they got married on the first day of 1938, and on the 19th day of 1939, I was born. So that's a very important story to me. Well, anyway, back to the point. So I get thinking about it, and I said to my dad, you should be in business for yourself. And he said, well, I've kind of thought about it a little bit, but I don't know. And so a couple of days go by, and this wasn't a store, by the way. This is just a little building that's kind of their office. They're on leased ground. It's not much of a lumber yard, although it's very successful financially. So I'm there, and I knew Wegmiller well, and I looked at my dad and I said, I'm going to ask him. And my dad kind of shook his head a little bit. I don't think he was saying no, he just was kind of taken back. So I walked over to Wegmiller and I said, Mr. Wegmiller, I said, my dad and I are going to buy a lumber yard. Would you consider selling this one to us? And he paused for a couple of minutes and he said, I think I would. So to make a long story short, my dad and I, with the help of some banks and with the help of a couple of uncles, we bought the Wegmiller Lumber Company. Now, many of you might remember it eventually became Wegmiller Bender, and then when Wegmiller had passed away and had no relatives, and nobody could hardly pronounce the name except those of us who did every day, it became Bender Lumber. And over the years, we started one very modest store, and just to give you an idea, we probably do, it's not uncommon for us to do more business in 2 days than we did in a whole year when we bought that business. So we bought that business. In '73, we had a catastrophic fire, but fortunately, I'd opened a very small branch in Bedford. And over the years, we continued to open more stores. And the best story I can tell you, because I can pick on Jesse Brand here. Every time I saw Jesse Brand at a lumber meeting, he owned a lumber yard in Columbus called Brand's. I would say to Jesse, if you ever get ready to sell your lumber yard, call me. So one day, 5, 6, 7 years ago? Yeah? 10? Time goes, yeah. Jesse calls me, and the first thing he says, all those years you were talking to me about buying my lumber yard, were you just kidding? And I said, is this the call I never thought I was going to get? And my next comment, did you have to wait till I was an old man? But anyway, we bought Jesse's store and combined it with one of our stores, and it's been a great success. And Jesse just reminded me of something that I'm sort of proud of. I said, Jesse, if I'm going to buy this lumber yard and you're going to sell it to me, we're not going to do it if we can't remain friends when it's over, and we're still very good friends. So I think that pretty well covers the basics of the lumber business. But it's been interesting to be in several different businesses. I've always enjoyed business, and there's a few things I've learned, I think, being in business, and one of them is that you have to be willing to change if you're going to be successful in business. Conditions change, opportunities change, and a lot of times you'd want everything to stay the same, but it's not going to stay the same. And some of my better successes have come right after some fairly serious failures. So hope that gives you an idea of what being in the pizza business and the lumber business is like, and I'll invite Dan to the stage.
Thank you, John. That was awesome. For anyone who's been around Bloomington for a long time, we know the John Bender story, we know you, but boy, there's a lot that I didn't know, and I think that's probably a true statement for many, many people in this room, with the exception of just a few who know the entire story. I could sit here, I've got a lot of questions that I could ask, and I think we have the leeway if we want to perhaps offer up, if anybody has any questions from the audience, we'll definitely do that. But when I think about and listen to your story, especially the early days in the beginning of Pizza Hut, the words bootstrap come to mind, and fortuitous, good fortune, if you will, being able to recognize when good fortune maybe has landed in your lap. What comes to mind about those really early days that if you think back on a decision you made, one that really said, boy, that was a really good decision, or just the opposite, boy, that was a bad decision, but I learned from it. Does anything kind of jump out to you?
No, I don't know if I can think of any one decision, because it's a series of decisions. I think one of the things is to be willing to realize a decision is, are we okay?
Is that working? Okay.
About it? To realize that a decision is not appropriate and change and make a different decision. I think that's the main thing that I learned very quickly in trying to do this, because everything doesn't work out, and you don't want to beat a dead horse. If it's not working, you better change.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
That's good. You mentioned, you had some great successes after perhaps some failures.
Yes.
We hear about the successes, but we don't often hear about the failures, and in particular what people learn. I've had the great pleasure of working with the Cook organization, the Cook family, for a long time, and Bill would always talk about his, not every decision was perfect. He made some great ones, but there were some doozies that he didn't make, that in a sense that didn't turn out exactly as planned. What did you learn from failures, and can you talk about, are there any failures in a business sense that really jumped to your head and really taught you something about going forward?
Well, I think probably two things. It comes back down to exactly the same thing I've already said, is that when things aren't working, you've got to change something. And then the other thing is that, one of the businesses I was in that all of you will be familiar with is I was one of the investors and partner in the first Morgenstern bookstore. Well, Borders came to town, and the other big bookstore chain came to town, and our sales dropped in half. And that, if we would continue that business, it was going to be a long time before it was successful. Now, the interesting thing is that business is recycled. So, but there comes a time when sometimes there are circumstances beyond your control that you got to maybe do something different.
Yep.
So,
when you and I talked in preparation for this, one of the things that we talked about was the importance of partners. importance of having good partners
Yes.
in your way. You had an idea in a sense. You had a vision. You had and not just with pizza business, but
Other businesses,
in any of your
yeah.
businesses. The importance I know to you of partners and finding the right partners was critical in your business success. Can you talk about
Yes.
how that
I can.
affected your
I can.
business?
There's several things. First of all, I found out that I was more visionary rather than, sometimes I wasn't good at execution. So I always would like to have a partner that would be good at execution, so something would get done. The other thing is, in picking partners, one of the things that I've found is that it's really important that you have similar goals, that you have similar values. I probably only have maybe, out of several partnerships, I've only had a couple go bad, and it was because the person that I was in partners with had different values, had different ideas about integrity and things like that. So often I find my partner through someone who is working for me, that I would like the kind of person they were, and I excuse me, would encourage them to be in business. That would happen more than once.
So you were 19 when this started, in a sense, right?
Right.
When you started, in a sense, Pizza Hut.
Yes.
How in the world is a 19-year-old ready for that opportunity and able to take it, kind of take that advantage of
I
that?
think there's probably two
forward?
things. One, I had a lot of experiences that would allow me to think I could do it. Probably I was pretty naive to think I could do it. And I was probably desperate to have something that I could be successful at, because up to that time, I'd had some unsuccessful experiences.
Yep. And it all worked out.
It worked out.
So pizza, lumber, biotechnology, as you said, that's not a linear path. and obviously a lot of the partners that you made along the way helped you navigate and find some of those opportunities. One of the other things I learned about you is that you're an avid reader, a voracious reader of books and reading about everything. You talked about that, about how important that's been to your life, in your life.
Yes.
And why is that? Why have you found that reading, in particular, and reading books, has been so important to you?
I think I need to tell you how I probably became a reader. As much as anything, my Saturdays as a little boy growing up were this. I would go to the lumberyard, hang out in the middle of the shop. Then we'd go to the junkyard, because my dad was always building a project. So he was looking for a piece or part. Then we go home, we had a little farm, a little hobby farm. We'd do our chores, take our shower for church the next day, and at 4 o'clock, we would go to the library. And we would stay in the library till 8 o'clock. Did that every Saturday going up. So if somebody takes you to the library, what are you going to do? And once you become a reader, you usually stay a reader.
Yeah.
But reading has been important. There's a lot of times you can learn something that you maybe can't find someone that can tell you, but you can always find a book to learn what you need to learn.
Yep. So we saw the student-run businesses out in the hallway, and we've got students in the audience here, if you will. What are some of your, you've obviously already given them messages, in a sense, and ideas and lessons and part of your story, but what would you tell the budding entrepreneurs in the room, if you will, about how they think about starting their own business, how they grow their business? If you were in their shoes today, what would you want someone to have told you?
Well, there's really only one word that describes what you need to do to be successful in business. It's called perseverance. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a lot of perseverance, you probably are not, you're going to be frustrated and you're maybe not going to be happy. It takes a lot of perseverance and as I've said before, the willing to change, to make things, if people don't want what you got, find something else.
I think when we talked, you mentioned that, I can't remember who you were describing this case, that somebody who had come to you later and said, I think I'm going to leave my job, leave my strong place, strong employment and go start my own business. I can't remember exactly what that story was, but
Yeah, I'll tell
I
it.
remember what you told them.
I'll tell that story real quick. Years ago, after I had served as the Chamber of Commerce president, the chamber exec said, we've got several people that would like to start a business and they'd like for you to do a little seminar to kind of give this some encouragement. So I said, well, I'll do that. So we set up a meeting, and now I'll give you the characters that were in the meeting. One of them was the HR manager for GE, one of them was the plant manager for BF Goodrich, and one of them was the Sears manager. And so that gives you an idea of my audience was. And so we're talking about their interests. Now these guys are all probably 45 years old, at least 40 years old. And so about the third session, I looked at them and I said, you know, fellas, you may not really want to be going into this. You're probably making a good income. You got a great retirement plan. If you're going to business, you're going to mortgage your house. You're going to take your retirement plan. And there's a great deal of chance that you may fail. So maybe this is not the best idea. Believe it or not, years later, I had 2 or 3 of them come to me and say, you gave me good advice. So going into business is not for everybody, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's good. I want to be mindful. It's an honor and a pleasure to have John here and give us his time. I'm sure there are questions out in the audience, so I mean I can keep asking. But Steve, I think Carl's got one. Adam, I think do you have an extra mic? I thought somebody said there might be one. Yeah, we're grabbing it, or I can tell a joke while we wait. Or maybe, hey, I got a question while we wait.
Carl, you want my mic?
So,
I'll just, how's that?
okay, there.
Okay.
Okay, so, for those of us old enough, Domino's was a completely different pizza 30, 40 years ago. If you were to make a pizza like you made back in Wichita for those guys, how different is it from the pizza that's sitting back here?
Very different. Yeah, you know, pizza has become homogenized, in my opinion. It has no flavor. Nobody puts any sauce on. Yeah, we could have a long discussion, Carl, and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. If you'd like to know how to do a good job at home, I'll be glad to give you some recipes. Great question.
Other questions for John? Yeah, there's one.
Yes, being here, Mr. John Bender. Would you attribute your success to business strategies or to networking, building relationships?
Can you help me?
Can you say it one more time? It's kind of hard to hear.
Would you attribute more to your success to business strategies or networking, building relationships?
Your own. What was more important to your success? The strategies, the business strategies, or the relationships?
Great question. No, relationships. Absolutely relationships. See, because I'll give you a great. Your strategies don't always work, and when the strategy doesn't work, you better have a really good relationships with the people you're working with. You're going to be a deep doo-doo.
That's a great lesson. That's a great lesson. Other questions for John? Got a couple of them here. Okay. Peggy?
So you shared that some of your ideas did not work out. Can you elaborate in any greater detail on the anecdotes? Maybe humorous, maybe not. It's something more specific when you think, I had a great idea and it wasn't. Could you share a little more about that?
Well, yeah, I don't like that question as much as I like the others. But I'll give you two. While I was opening the Pizza Hut in Fort Worth, Texas, I decided that I read an article about fish and chips, and fish and chips wasn't a common thing like it is today. And in fact, I couldn't find another restaurant. There probably was one, but I could not find anybody in the United States that was selling a product called fish and chips. So I opened a small seafood restaurant in Dallas, Texas, and we featured fish and chips. And although I think I was very innovative and had a great idea. It just didn't go anywhere. The business lasted for about 5 years. I had a young partner who ran it, and we eventually sold it to somebody else, and they opened a second store and failed. And I'm not exactly sure why. I actually had dinner with my partner, that partner just recently, and his idea was the reason that it failed is I came back to Indiana and got in the lumber business and I abandoned him. I'll give you one more. Frozen yogurt. Frozen yogurt was all the rage, right? There was a period of time when everybody had frozen yogurt. So a friend of mine and I, we get this idea we're going to do that, and we do lots of research. We find a great yogurt. It's Colombo yogurt out of Methuen, Massachusetts. We make arrangements for it to be shipped out here in a refrigerated vehicle, and I get Beasley Produce to store it for me, and we opened 2 stores. One of them was the Jiffy Tree store on Pete Ellis Drive, right? Well, that was our yogurt store. We had one at 3rd and Jordan, and the volume just wasn't there. Now, if that would have been my only business, I would probably done some things, added ice cream, maybe added sandwiches, but it was since it didn't take off and go. But if you go out to the time, if you were in Boston or you in New York, people were in a line to get but it didn't hit in Bloomington like that. So, timing, maybe not a real commitment. Some of these, I tell you, really, seriously, some of these things that I weren't successful with, I probably didn't get the same attention that I did maybe other businesses. One of the things I always thought in the lumber business, my son here would tell you, is I never worried too much about making money. I was worried about, will I survive? That always was what I really concentrate on. I don't want to make a mistake that will cause me not to survive.
Yeah, it's great. Back in the back there.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your service. I'm not particularly well versed in history, but I am a fan of pizza. So I was wondering, you were there at the beginning in Wichita. Can you talk about, one, your experience being part of the pizza wars, as I understand it, between Pizza Hut, who kind of pioneered it, and Domino's, and then 2, at what point did you know that you were part of a winning business with Pizza Hut insofar as expanding into 25 stores?
You're going to have to help me.
I think say it again, I'm sorry, I don't want to.
I'm curious about the pizza wars and when you knew
Pizza wars,
was a
okay.
success, a winner.
Yeah.
I'm not so familiar with that, really. Maybe I didn't say, I probably didn't have a reason to say, but the franchise group, the 25 stores I sold out in 1990, and I think the pizza wars probably came after that. As we know, everybody in this room knows that Pizza Hut is somewhat struggling at this time domestically. However, they're extremely successful in Europe and Asia, and there's about 17,000 Pizza Huts the last time I checked worldwide. But they've had some cycles up and down. This will give you one insight to the pizza business. Sometime in the late 60s, early 70s, a Pizza Hut opened in Columbus, Indiana. It didn't happen to be mine. I don't even know who owned it. And when they opened, that was the only pizza restaurant in Columbus, Indiana. Today, there are 18 pizza restaurants in Indiana. So the business has become very, very competitive, unlike what it was when I first started. So that may be some of the explanation. There's just probably too many people in the business.
Hi, John. Eric Spoonmore, President of the Chamber of Commerce here in Bloomington. Thank you so much for the great discussion tonight. You've done a lot of work in a lot of different communities. I'm curious, entrepreneurs, small businesses need support with government. We need partnership with government. You probably had some success in some communities, less success in others due to that partnership. What have you found to be the most helpful kinds of partnership with local elected leaders as you're trying to grow your business?
Boy, that's a leading question, isn't it? Well, I will tell you, I enjoy being in business in Columbus, Indiana, a lot more than I like Bloomington, Indiana. You know, the difference in, we all know where we live. This is a very difficult town to do business in. It's a wonderful town to live in, and it has many, many good things, but it is a tough place to do business. And I haven't been given that hard a time, but I know that it is difficult to get things done. And, you know, I have lots of customers that are builders, and I can tell you one builder that recently told me that he had a piece of land that he could build an apartment on. It didn't need any variances. It was zoned properly, and it took him a year to get a permit. And I hear that over and over and over again. So this is I don't know what we do to fix it, but it's not good, for sure.
I think we've got time for one more probably question. I saw a young man's hand over here.
I don't know if I'll just speak up. This is a joke question, but I guess I need you to settle a debate. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
What a great question.
I think anything belongs on pizza, except I've never eaten pineapple on pizza, but now you mention it, I'm going to try it soon.
It's a Hawaiian pizza. It's good. All right, well, please. Oh, sorry. One more. Okay. We got one more question. Ken Ritchie.
It's Ken Ritchie. I was just curious about your experience and your opinions on the real estate business. I know you've been involved in it for many, many years, and that's one thing you haven't touched on is real estate. What's your adventures in real estate and your advice to people who invest in real estate?
What?
Real estate.
RCA.
Yeah. Real estate business.
Well, Joyce Poling, let's see your hand, Joyce. She talked Tim Mitchell and Skip Harold and I into buying the RCA building when it went vacant. And it only took 25 years for us to repurpose that, but it was a lot of fun. But I will say one thing, that when the GE plant came for sale, thank you, Mr. Cook, I think it worked out for you a lot quicker than it did for me. But I've enjoyed some success in the real estate business, and that was a good project. I liked it, but it took a lot longer than you would ever think. But I will have to say, in closing, I've enjoyed the questions more than I enjoyed my talk.
No, it was all great. It was all great. Final question. Do you claim credit for the success of Eric Coyne?
Well, I'm known to be an encourager. I was glad to hear that I encouraged him. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Thank you, John.